Hi guys, my name is Tiana. Welcome to my channel. I'll be talking about careers, finances, education and more. So if you're interested in any of those topics, make sure to subscribe. So the topic of today's video is all about language learning. I recently watched a really interesting interview between a YouTuber called Mr Salas and a kind of famous polyglot called Steve Kaufmann. Steve Kaufmann has learned over 20 languages. Yeah, 20. And 10 of those he's learned after the age of 60, including Arabic and Farsi, which definitely aren't easy to learn. So I thought it'd be really interesting for this video if I talked about some of the things that both Mr Salas and Steve Kaufmann talked about in their interview, some of their tips for learning languages as both of them are polyglots, and yeah, just incorporate my own advice into that. So the first thing that Steve Kaufmann and Mr Salas talk about in their interview is the fact that motivation is key. Motivation and self-belief when learning a language is so important, and so many people believe that it's impossible to learn a language once you've passed your childhood years. It is true that in some ways it can be easier for children to learn languages. Children before the age of 6 months are able to distinguish phonemes in any language. For example, in English the sounds b and v are different, whereas in Spanish they're the same sound. There's no distinction between them. And a child would recognise distinctions in phonemes between any language up until the age of 6 months. However, after the age of 6 months, they become restricted to sounds that they hear on a daily basis, i.e. the sounds in their environment, which is usually the language that their parents speak. However, there are other things that children do that we can definitely incorporate into our learning as an adult. Children aren't afraid to make mistakes, they just speak. And one of the things that adults always struggle with when learning a language is that they're afraid to speak to native speakers, so most of the time they focus their effort on grammar books, vocab lists, and maybe a bit of reading and writing, but not really the communication aspect, which is so important. Another thing related to motivation is the fact that you should learn a language that interests you. One of the major problems with learning a language in school is that most of the time you don't have a choice about what you're learning. For myself, I took French classes for 3 years in school, as it was compulsory for everyone, and I also took Mandarin Chinese classes for 4 years, which I was far more interested in as it was my option subject and it was something that I'd actually chosen to learn. So one thing to do if you're learning a language as an adult is to make sure you choose something that you're interested in, whether you're interested in the culture, using the language for work, travelling to the country. It's really important to choose something that you have passion about. The second thing that Steve Kaufmann talks about in this interview is the importance of comprehensible input. So that's essentially where you listen and read materials that are slightly above your current level. People are often quite scared to begin listening and reading in the language, especially because at first there's a big chance that you won't understand very much at all. However, the entire point is to get used to that language. Even though you may think you don't understand anything, your brain is constantly processing the words, processing the vocabulary, becoming accustomed to how native speakers speak and what words actually sound like instead of how they're written. One of the tips that Steve Kaufmann gives is to read and listen at the same time. So if you're watching a video in your target language, you can read along with the subtitles, or if you're listening to a podcast, you can read along with the transcript. Something that I like to stress is that it's important to listen or read materials that interest you. So just how you might watch a romantic comedy or an action film in your native language, you should do the same in your target language. The third thing that Steve Kaufmann talks about in the interview is the importance of practicing speaking. It's something that all of us avoid, and usually we're just really nervous to be laughed at or for a native speaker to think that we sound really bad. But it's so important to practice, and it's the key to being able to move forward in your fluency. If you practice listening a lot, which I mentioned earlier, speaking should come fairly naturally to you when it's needed. However, it's also important to practice. Maybe you could practice with a native speaker through using an app like Tandem, or you could just practice with yourself. One of the things that I do is just to watch a video of a native speaker speaking and just occasionally pause the video and then repeat after them so that I get used to the sounds. So guys, that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and that some of these language learning tips can be useful for you. If you have any more tips maybe about how you've learnt a language before, make sure to comment them. I'd be really interested to know. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.